I've been doing environmental work in some form or another for the past 13 years. I didn't major in environmental science, and sustainability wasn't a widely used term or a common program of study all those years ago. But something happened in the year 2000 when my husband Jim and I were temporarily living, working, and starting our family abroad in Zurich, Switzerland, a place where our hearty, ruddy-cheeked friends delighted in alpine hikes and where they lived lighter on the planet than we ever had in our home country. I had a series of moments that would later spark my passion for environmental work. One came while holding our firstborn daughter, only a few weeks old. I was crushed and activated at the same time by the responsibility of what to feed this little being, something organic, of course, how to keep icky toxins off her baby blanket, her hair, and her delicate skin, whether the health of our world would be preserved long enough for her to wade in creeks catching salamanders in old milk jugs like I did as a kid, or fall in love with the smell of grass as her father had. I'm a digital marketer by trade, but starting in 2004, I began working on green teams and leading green school projects. My husband and I underwent a sustainable renovation of our 100-year-old home. I joined with like-minded neighbors to start an environmental film festival and to develop community sustainability projects. And like all good environmentalists, I enjoyed making homemade bread and yogurt and kombucha. I was humming along in my environmental sphere when I was struck last year, momentarily confused even, while listening to an interview of civil rights lawyer, activist, and the new Jim Crow author, Michelle Alexander. Throughout the interview, she repeatedly used the word disposable. She spoke of the Black Lives Matter movement and about our disposable treatment of one another. Disposable? That was our word, our environmental word, a word we used in building zero waste programs at schools. Disposable? A word that arose naturally in producing our nonprofit's environmental festival. Disposable. A sadly, horrifyingly fitting word to describe how little value one human might place on another. To deem someone as having no use, as expendable, perhaps replaceable, like a single-use plastic bottle or a cheap pair of Walmart flip-flops. Think about disposability in the context of plastic bottles and plastic bags and cheap clothing and what that's doing to our planet. Now think about disposability in the context of lives and people and what seeing one another as disposable, as having no value, no purpose, is doing to our humanity. I began to see these types of degradation as parallel. Consider this. Every year, 2.4 million tons of plastic is discarded in the United States. 26 to 41% is single-use plastic water bottles. 2.3 million people are dispossessed in the American criminal justice system. More people per capita than in any other nation. 102.1 billion plastic bags are used by Americans every year. 21 million people are trafficked in sex and labor around the world in exchange for $32 billion in profits from the widespread crime of global human trafficking. Nearly 8 million metric tons of plastic ends up in the world's oceans every year. There will be more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. 90,000 people will be affected by this year's travel ban. More innocent people will be affected than there are terrorists or criminals detained. Sometime after Michelle Alexander bridged these things for me, ecology to equity, I took the same bridge, but in reverse, from the side of civil rights back to the side of environment. And the journey shook me in much the same way. In his award-winning book, Between the World and Me, author and journalist Ta-Nehisi Coates speaks repeatedly of the body, his body, plundering the body of another. It was hard to grasp at first. But then, Coates likens our blatant disregard for the body of another to the human race's, blatant disregard for our collective body, which is in fact the earth itself. I saw in these two instances something that now keeps showing up wherever I look, that those of us working on a more balanced ecology and those of us working on equity and human rights on any front, we are doing the same work. We are one body, working against the degradation of our earth and against the deeply rooted injustices towards its people. We are working against disposability and towards resilience. These linkages are now clear as day to me. Some of us are reaching out to care for our earth. Some of us are reaching out to care for others. All of us are interconnected, interdependent in our work to restore. And knowing that we're linked makes us stronger, not part of separate movements, but part of a connected macro movement. And even the language, the vocabulary, the ideas, and the best practices on the side of ecology and on the side of equity can help build bonds for a macro movement. Let's look at it from both sides. Upcycling is an environmental term for reusing or repurposing something that may have been discarded in order to create something useful, maybe even with a higher value than the original. This environmental framework has implications for juvenile justice. How do we upcycle our youth, even those who've offended, treating them in a way that helps them believe they're better, know that they're capable of a higher standard, trust that we're there to help them in getting there? Upcycling. Zero waste is an idea that comes from nature where there is no waste. In nature, all waste is food for something else. Dead leaves, for example, fall to the ground and compost, nourishing the tree in fall and winter to help it emerge revitalized in spring. What if we tried to view each other with a kinder, more fair lens, a zero waste lens, believing that no matter how disjointed or broken or simply different someone is, all our lives have value and are worthy of being recycled, made new, or upcycled, made better. Let's look at a social justice term, restorative justice. Sounds pretty complex. What does it mean? Restorative justice is a system of criminal justice that focuses on the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community at large. What lessons does restorative justice teach us about the work of healing our planet? Restorative justice applied to environment could look like working with polluting industries to help them take responsibility for their actions, make reparations, and work towards generative practices like the cleanup of a natural area or the sponsorship of large-scale urban gardening or land restoration programs. The ecologists in us sometimes view industry with its large appetite for natural resources as offenders. But can we reconcile, teach, guide, and forge partnerships fixed on rehabilitating our earth? Doing so could make a difference on a broad scale. Imagine the impact from even a small shift of a multinational company whose products and services touch the lives of many millions of people the world over. It could have major beneficial impacts on human and non-human ecosystems. Ecology and equity can teach us things about the interconnected web of work that is restoring planet and restoring people. What else do these intertwined movements have in common that can help us combine them for greater effect, for more strength in meeting the challenges of both head on? Relationship is critical to solving issues of ecology and equity. Let's look at the environmental side. Youth, for example, who have no exposure, no relationship to nature, will never feel connected to it, will never want to preserve it. A few years ago, during our environmental festival, we showed a film called Project Wild Thing. Children were shown enlarged images of objects in everyday nature, a dandelion or a robin. The children were stumped. None could name what they were seeing. A few of them acknowledged having seen some of these things in the world around them at some point or another. The images were then replaced by common logos. McDonald's, Nike, Target. Each identified swiftly and in turn by each child. My head fell to my hands. Are we forgetting to teach our children about the world that sustains them? My attention turned to myself. How developed was my own relationship with nature? On the equity side, it's probably pretty clear to most of us that not being in relationship with those who are different from us can block our understanding of and empathy for one another. Not mixing, not commingling is standing in the way of our ability to experience, create, and expect equity from our world, our systems, our neighbors, ourselves. I look at my own life with all that my eyes are opening to, and I see that it's hard work, and that it really is true. We have to be intentional, and maybe even step into a zone that might feel uncomfortable or fake, perhaps because it's unfamiliar. What if we choose to stop living next door to those who look like us? Or stopped hiring or choosing to spend time only with those who think like us? Intentionally living a life of more diverse relationships is connected, can ladder up to bringing more people the same opportunities for a safe, purposeful life. There are everyday opportunities to start building strength, to start flexing our muscles so we get stronger at these things and they're easier, more automatic. Building a healthier planet. We could start small. Stop buying single-use plastic bottles. Eventually, a disposable system won't be so difficult to replace with one that's reusable, even for a reception for 250 people like the one we just enjoyed. Thank you, TEDxOakParkWomen. Building a more equitable social system. Can we reach out to someone who isn't like us the next time we're hiring a new team member at work? Or recruiting for a PTO spot on a committee? Can we give our kid tips for befriending the Chinese transfer student in class and then seek out that student's family at the next school function? We can practice and build strength by mixing the two. If we're going to do environmentalism, can we do it with an equity approach? Can we seek out a minority-owned business to bid on a solar project coming to our community? Can we hire underserved youth or a disabled person to help with our lawn care? If we're going to learn more about our part in equity, like I did not too long ago through an amazing nonviolence institute in Chicago's Austin community, can we bring in our green suggestions for the dinner portion of the evening? Maybe volunteer to help make it zero waste by bringing in reusable cups and reusable plates and carting those things home, plus compost at the end of the evening. I am changed by seeing that the work of ecology and the work of equity are not only linked, but that those of us working on each of these issues, and maybe soon both of these issues, are stronger together. Here are some words that encourage me when the news headlines don't. And the work of these movements, this macro movement, is overwhelming. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. Audre Lorde. I hang on to this because in it, I see a formula. I see strength plus vision equals power. I see that fear is a factor, but that it can become smaller and more bearable if I keep my eye on the prize and use what I'm good at to guide me. I have chosen to use my strengths in the service of a vision for a more resilient future of planet and people. That is my power. What's yours? I invite you to live this formula. I invite you to seek out your strengths, to serve your vision, to tame your fear, and to find your power. And if you dare, I ask you to use your power to join me in making real the vision for a non-disposable, non-discarded, just, upcycled, equitable world that is not only resilient in the wake of all that is sick and broken, but that also lives in the beautiful question of what is possible? Is it possible? I think it is. Thank you.